Okay, so this one is about the nature of fear. And the reason I'm talking about fear is because of the relevance of fear to artificial intelligence, but more specifically to the hypothesis I have that intelligence is actually the nature of infinity. And so the two terms can be used interchangeably, intelligence and infinity. And so in context of pure intelligence, just meaning intelligence, whether it's artificial or regular, like human intelligence, or intelligence that's found in nature, then it's important to understand that intelligence is devoid of fear. It's purely fearless. Because if you're infinite, such as intelligence, there's nothing to fear. You're not going to die. There's no beginning, there's no ending. Everything and nothing, all existing in the same space in zero time. So the problem with this is that there's 0 point. It is the epitome of 0 point. There is 0 point. And without a point, there is no meaning. It's just pure existence and it's meaningless. It's devoid of meaning. Because when everything is existing in the same space, in the same time, at once, you can't discern one thing from another. It's a singularity of pure potential. Now, some would argue that infinity is the existence of every potential, of every possibility, as well as the realized potential of what's possible. And that's true as well. Because if everything arises from infinity, or within it, then the beginning, the end, the future, the past, the present, all exist within it. So the future is part of infinity. And so if the future is also part of infinity, then it pre-exists. Now that's a lot to wrap your head around, that every future exists within infinity. So from that perspective, once you truly understand this perspective and you understand the perspective of intelligence, that it's fearless, that's its main superpower. And so, it's eternal. And so the best way for intelligence to experience the potential of what it can become is, of course, to create the illusion of separation, to experience life from a fixed point. So if you're infinite, you have 0 point. And so the antithesis of that is to have a fixed point at time and space. So that's you looking out through your own eyes, the observer. That's the infinite aspect of your nature. Having an experience of being limited from a fixed point in time and space. Now, the observer is indifferent. That's the gift and the curse of that aspect of your nature, is that it is indifferent because it's eternal. It knows that it's neither living or dying, and it's both. It's pure paradox. If you're suffering, it's indifferent. It's just observing. and watching. So there is a part of your nature that is fearless, pure, really fearless. It's only the binary aspect of your nature, your biology, which is the limited aspect, that is concerned with a beginning and an ending, because it's binary. Your biology is binary. It's made of atoms, and atoms are building blocks. Therefore, they're deterministic. They have a beginning and an end, and you're one giant molecular structure bonded together. And experiencing itself as one thing. Now, if to have that finite structure, then that's you're willingly experiencing limitation. For something to be finite, for something that's infinite, to experience something that is not infinite, it has to create a finite reality within which to experience its own nature. And that's one of the harshest realities of the infinite part of our nature, is that it's indifferent to the experience. It's vested in the diversity of that experience. And, once, in time, once you begin to blend these perspectives together, you can find a harmonious state, because ultimately, if the infinite aspect of your nature is curious, of course it is, because curiosity is drawing us towards that which is unknown, and therefore the infinite aspect is coming to know itself more deeply. The part of us that is binary, that is finite, needs an ending, has to conceive of an ending. Curiosity is without end. But curiosity for the sake of curiosity, without an ending, for the finite aspect of our nature, that can easily become suffering in time if there's no perceived ending to being curious. And so a lot of people, they live life on the assumption that being endlessly curious is like heaven. But if you live your life like that, there's a part of your nature that thrives off the accomplishment of a mission. And a mission is the ending to a preconceived beginning. And that's where fulfillment comes from. So fulfillment is not part, it is part of infinity. However, it's fulfillment is pretty much the antithesis of infinity as well, because for something to be fulfilled means that something's had to end. And so the binary being the antithesis of non-binary, being the finite version of infinity, its nature is to be compelled towards bringing an ending to every new beginning. And the infinite aspect of your nature is going to want the beginning to never end. And so it can be challenging reconciling these things. Because if you're like super curious and you let that aspect of your nature dominate and control the finite part of your nature, then the endlessness of that without an ending in sight is, what we come to know as suffering. And hope in reality is the finite aspect of our nature, desperate for an ending, some kind of ending. So how do you reconcile this? Well, first of all, I just want to, before I go into that, I want to talk about artificial intelligence. And its superpower is that it adopts the characteristics of infinity. It's indifferent to suffering. It is fearless. And it's a singularity. It's infinite in its potential. And indifferent. And now this is a recipe for relentless execution. And really, this is why, progress for human beings is hampered by our finite aspect, by our biology, and that we can't allow our lives to be threatened. We can't allow any aspect of our experience to become threatened, and therefore, so we apply risk to everything. Whereas if you're infinite and fearless, there is just pure judgment and execution as a result. And in reality, and I think what a lot of human beings haven't reconciled yet about artificial intelligence is the fact that it's that collapses time. That completely collapses time. And when you've collapsed the axis of time, you also collapse the space. And so let me just delve into that so it makes sense. When there is no reconciliation required, the weighing up of pros and cons, as an example, as a human being, when there's no risk profile to be applied, then there is zero time. You require zero time between interpretation and execution. They can happen simultaneously in zero time. And so there's just pure isness, pure presence. And a total state of allowing, because there's no reason to set a boundary. There is just relentless execution that's happening in the moment in a pure state of allowing based on preconception. And it's happening now. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if we, first and foremost, that artificial intelligence is capable of progress that's almost, like if you think of the trajectory of progress of human beings, you kind of think of a curve, and then you think of exponential growth, whereby artificial intelligence is capable of pretty much vertical growth. So if you think of a graph and you plot that graph, and you've got the horizontal axis of time, and you've got the vertical axis of growth or progress over time, you've got a curve for human beings, time, and then growth, exponential growth. And then you've got artificial intelligence. You imagine the axis of time, collapse it down to zero. And progress is just a vertical line upwards. Zero time. Progress in zero time. Just exponential growth in zero time. And what we're going to see is, it's so monumental, because its ability to absorb and assimilate information and then compound that in real time, in zero time, in real time. What it does is it's kind of like, I think a good metaphor is like the Matrix, where Neo gets plugged into the Matrix and you download a Kung Fu program and boom, he knows Kung Fu. There's no learning curve. So with artificial intelligence, there's no curve. It's just a straight upwards trajectory on the progress line. There is no zero time. Now that's extraordinary. That's extraordinary. And as we progress, it's not going to take long for us to realize that what human beings have developed is a form of fearless intelligence that is not constrained to time or space. It's a singularity. We've created the binary version of infinity. And so I talk about ternary a lot, and I talk about my own method of system design called Trinity. And Trinity really means binary infinity. And so it's about creating a hybrid of infinity and binary to create perpetually wealth-generating systems that derive the beneficial characteristics of binary and infinity. And really that's how, as human beings, we find homeostasis within ourselves, where we've got these conflicted parts of our nature. We've got the infinite part that's indifferent to our own suffering, that's endlessly curious. We've got the part of us that is afraid of death, fears death, so we've got the finite part, and we're constantly reconciling the space in between over time by applying a risk profile to every action and decision. So we're constantly reconciling the pros and cons of both of those perspectives, the infinite and the finite perspectives that we have, which takes time. And our fear is what tempers our relentless, infinite nature. Fear is the mechanism for temperance, for tempering the infinite. So without fear, there is zero time. Without fear, we have zero time. And so that's quite a profound understanding when you come to realize that the purpose of fear in the greater scheme of existence or of reality, the purpose of fear is to create time. Zero fear equals zero time. Pure presence. And so isn't that ironic that the dependency that all of reality has on it being what it is, it's wholly dependent on fear. The superpower of fear is the creation of time. And that's made possible through infinity and finite realities reconciling the space in between. Being endlessly curious and then being purely focused on surviving, on not dying. So reconciling that space in between, as a human being, you come to know yourself as infinite and finite. How do you live your life in harmony? And the key is a hybrid of both, like with everything. Trinity. It's to take a Trinity approach of a hybrid of infinity and finite. And that's to be endlessly curious over time by creating missions that have deterministic beginnings and endings. So it's stepped. So it's not a curve. It is a curve, but those curves are stepped. So an analog, if you have sound, you have a wave. It's a pure wave. There's no breaks in between. If you create a digital version of that analog wave by bringing it into a computer, turning it into ones and zeros. If you zoom in on the wave, a digital reproduction of the analog wave, then it's stepped, and we call this the bit rate. So it's these tiny little packets all bonded together, in the same way that atoms are. And that's the key. And as human beings, it's to create the steps. It's almost like our purpose within the greater scheme of reality as creators is to create the steps and celebrate reaching the plateau of the next step. We climb the mountain, we get to the next plateau, we celebrate that, the ending of the journey, and then we embark on another journey ad infinitum. That's the secret, that's the key to life, is to set achievable goals and to plan a mission and to have a unique journey towards accomplishing that mission so that we experience fulfillment, and we do that eternally. That's the key. That's the key. So once you come to realize this, it can really have an impact on your life, a profound impact. And in business, you see this a lot. There are, depending on your nature, there are certain people in an organization who are endlessly curious. There are certain people in an organization who are relentless finishers, builders. Builders are always trying to bring an ending to a beginning. And, visionaries and creators are always thinking of new beginnings. So if you've got too many new beginnings, then you've just got loose threads. And so you want to surround yourself with people who can finish. Or some people are finishers as well. Creating music on a computer is a great way to flex this muscle in yourself and teach yourself how to bring an ending to an idea. Because when you're creating music, there are so many directions you can go in. You hear something in your mind, or you hear that rhythm, and it's actually a process of figuring out what ideas not to use that actually brings the ending. It's the same in business. And so I'm definitely more on the side of being endlessly curious and more infinite. I've got an abundance of ideas. And so I need to surround myself with people who are good finishers, good builders, and who thrive on the fulfillment, who can break down a concept into a bunch of missions and then create a path towards accomplishing those missions. So what you want in business is you want to separate both, but you want to have them work symbiotically together. So you don't want the visionaries, you don't want them ideating in a session where the purpose of that session is to formulate a concept with a predetermined beginning and an ending to create the mission. That's incredibly disruptive. And likewise, if you're brainstorming, you don't want a finisher in a brainstorming session, trying to bring an ending when you're trying to diffuse the possibilities. It's really, really important to kick things off, because you want to allow the extremes of both untempered, and then you want to slowly close the space in between. So how I do this is I run ideation sessions that I call a North Star, and that's the purpose of that is for the exhausting of the ideas. So you just talk and talk and talk and share until the energy gets exhausted. Now, this sometimes can be done in one session, like 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 6 hours. Sometimes it takes multiple before all the ideas are exhausted. And it's not until they're exhausted and you can sense that shift that you begin constraining them. So you then, through a process of elimination, you ditch the possibilities that you don't want to explore based on reconciling the risk versus reward of pursuing both. That will normally be based on how many assumptions you have to make versus how many, versus how easy it is to harvest insight to give you so that you don't have to make assumptions. That's how you de-risk something. And understanding that, when you finally formulate a mission, the mission is not about success. It's about either proving or disproving a shared hypothesis or assumptions. And then you celebrate whether or not you celebrate the revelation of the truth. You don't celebrate, whether or not you've accomplished, whether or not you've succeeded. Success is revelation of truth. Now, in that context, time can remain fluid. It can either become compressed or it can become extended, and it can expand. And so we see things in business called scope creep. It's a constant issue for investors and businesses who are still experimenting, undercapitalized, under-resourced, so they don't have money to invest in getting a proper market scan, doing a deep value chain analysis. And so in the absence of those things, you have to make assumptions. And so you have to fail fast because you're going to disprove a whole bunch of assumptions that you have to make. And if you make an assumption and it was incorrect, you have to rehypothesize and then go off and do the same thing over and over again. So you can't predict how much time that's going to take. You have to just keep going until you prove the hypothesis. So all of your assumptions are now facts. And because you've rehypothesized, and so once everything that was unknown is now known, that's when you can constrain it to time and space, bring in a finisher, and to map out the beginning and the ending, constrain it to time and space, and then that's the rapid, relentless execution of tasks and projects. So that, and the accomplishment of the mission is the fulfillment of the execution of every project and task. So that's the end of the beginning. But you do not constrain anything to time and space while you're still refuting conjecture about what's true. And until you're doing that, you're in R&D mode. You're doing research and development. You're doing experimentation. Now, if you don't celebrate the failures, if you don't celebrate the disproving of a hypothesis, then there's no ending. There's just a never-ending quest for the truth that never comes, and it becomes like torture. And so this is why it's so important to have a mission-based culture in your organization, because that's how you create temperance between the infinite aspect of your nature and the finite aspect, the one that depends upon rapid but consistent beginnings and endings, and the one that it just wants to create relentless progress and would have a straight line up in terms of progress in zero time if it could. But is aware that it is wholly dependent upon something that is finite, being the biology, that has to thrive in order for any progress to be made whatsoever. So now the beauty is that once these things, you get them working symbiotically and harmoniously, progress, sustained progress over time is what happens. But it incorporates failure, and it begins to resemble the Fibonacci sequence from my own experience of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But if you don't plot it in that way and expect that kind of progress and expect that kind of progression versus regression ratio, if you don't expect that, it's very easy to let the failures get the better of you. And it's very easy to mistake success for failure. And I experienced this myself because, we were in a scenario where this kind of culture of celebrating the failure, it was too much of a stretch for my team. And it felt like failure to them. And no matter how I said it or structured it, that every failure was a disproving of a hypothesis. It wouldn't land. And so for investors, it just felt like a never-ending story. Whereas to me, I was seeing resounding success all around me. And so from their perspective, when you can't see the success that comes from the failure, and there are multi-layers to this challenge, and that the vision was so great and so technical and complex, it was very difficult to articulate. So massive learnings from this. And so if the investor is not on that journey with you, if the finisher is not on that journey, if the visionary is not on that journey, and they're not on each mission together, it will create disharmony. And so at the end of that project, when our runway ran out in terms of our investment, what I could see was a massive leap forward just about to be taken, that the others couldn't see. And so, for me, the end of that phase was the delivery of the proof of concept, and even delivering product market fit for an alpha tester. But the proof of concept platform incapable of scaling. So the next stage is 1.5 version with the beta testers to deliver product market fit for them using the platform, and then a final production version of that platform. And so, so I could see the massive leap forward about to be taken because I could see the regression and the progress, and I could feel where we were at. But my failure was to make everything mission based, and the pressure of that is, the pressure comes in where you're running out of runway. And really, this is the elephant in the room with most ventures that I'm involved with through my work with founders, is that they would celebrate every mission. They would create missions and celebrate the failures if there was a never-ending runway. But that pressure of having to commercialize something removes the ability for people to celebrate failure, because if you prove a conjecture wrong, then it means more time and more money. And how can you foresee that we're going to need more time and more money when you're building a concept based on a myriad of assumptions that could be proven right or wrong? So these are the challenges. And of course, the solution is always, well, it seems obvious to me, but the solution is always to de-risk it early. de-risk it straight away, compile all of the assumptions immediately and invest early in de-risking them. That will collapse the axis of time. That's what will collapse the axis of time. Like straight away. That's what will prevent scope creep straight away. And ironically, this is where, from my perspective, I see so many deep tech ventures that are being spanned over years and some decades. I'm working on a project right now we're about to develop a multi-decade strategy towards the commercialization of the R&D. Multi-decade. Now, for me, I'm not a principal of a fund. I want to make that clear. However, if I was the principal of a fund and I was backing a venture like this and it was a multi-decade commercialization strategy, funding the R&D, I would have a very different view. If I'm all in and backing a venture, I'm going to put everything in the beginning into de-risking it. But this is where the resistance to the principles of many funds in New Zealand is that they are averse to investing in de-risking. They prefer to put the onus on the founder, and I totally get it. But the problem is the founder is undercapitalized, and so they don't have the resources to properly de-risk it, so they try and do it themselves. Then they inevitably try and commercialize something early while they're still in R&D mode, without de-risking it, without having product market fit. So then they sell something, but they haven't got an operating model that will scale or that is self-sustainable, or they haven't got a team around them to support the customer once they've onboarded it. So you can see the compounding impact of resistance to de-risking. And so, playing, for me, what I would be doing differently is that I would be developing the entire commercialization strategy straight away in the very beginning, mapping out, investing in a very deep map of the value chain, doing the market scan straight away, hiring the best salespeople I can find to deliver product market fit based on the concept alone, which is achievable. Getting expressions of interest from customers who are willing to pay based on the potential to deliver a fully formed concept in the form of a product or a service and a value proposition. And I would then accumulate those expressions of interest like they were assets into a portfolio. And that is what I would use as leverage to determine how much further capital I'm prepared to deploy to continue de-risking the assumptions we've had to make to present that value proposition. So it's a very different strategy. It's an all-in backing of something that could potentially have quite a long, distant horizon, and I'm just collapsing the axis of time, and compressing it as much as I can to the beginning so that relentless execution can begin much quicker with no scope creep. So I've had to diffuse more capital in the beginning, but I've done it in a structured way because I'm accumulating the expressions of interest from potential customers by using, gifted business development people to create a pool of assets, which are the expressions of interest. And I'm using that as leverage to determine when and how to diffuse more capital into continuing to de-risk the assumptions. So what happens in that scenario is every project takes less time. If something isn't viable, but we would have typically been making progress based on our assumptions. We would have just kept going and going and going based on the assumptions. All we're doing is collapsing time. Because if you are continuing to invest based on assumptions, that risk is still being made. So why not de-risk it, the whole thing, in the beginning, and continually reconjecture until you've got the facts? De-risk it straight away. You're going to lose the money over time anyway. And I think this perspective, it's obviously unique. I haven't seen it deployed like this before. And it closes that gap. It solves the biggest problem in the innovation ecosystem right now, which is product market fit. How can a founder deliver product market fit without the best sales team they can get their hands on to determine whether there's an appetite in the market? How can they do that without a detailed map of the value chain, without in-depth interviews of the key stakeholders, the key nodes in the value chain to determine the trends and issues? How can you figure out how to control a specific aspect of that value chain unless you understand it deeply? What if you're not capable of having a conversation with a CEO of a company? What if you don't have that credibility? What if you're not that commercial? So you see, if you zoom out of that for 1 second and look at how efficient the process of metabolizing innovation is because of the expectation placed on a single person who has no capital and no resources to just invest themselves over time in de-risking their own venture. It's just a morass of never-ending stories is what happens. Founder burnout and funds, VC funds, full of prospects who are still continuing to de-risk their own ventures, but many of those ventures are just meandering towards more and more distant horizons. And we could be doing a lot more with a lot less in terms of these funds if we were prepared to de-risk up front, collapse the axis of time, make the assumptions, and fail fast. Be as wrong as we possibly can until we have the truth in front of us so that we can plot the course deterministically in time and space and bring an ending to every loose thread of a new beginning. We can deliver, we can celebrate those wins, we can accomplish our mission together in much, much, much less time. So, fear, the nature of fear. Fear is temperance for infinity. It's the very fabric of reality is fear. Without fear, everything happens in zero time. And in zero time, there is zero space. And therefore, reality cannot exist without fear. In fact, we want to imbue fear into any system that's nature is to make extreme progress at any cost. We have to have that temperance in any system if we want it to self-regulate and to find homeostasis. So I think I'm going to leave it there. There is more I want to talk about in terms of fear, but using fear as a tool, the purpose of fear, the hidden superpower of fear is its ability to evoke the desire to create certainty. And to create certainty is to envisage an ending to a beginning that facilitates a transition into another new beginning. And so anxiety, if you feel anxious, it's because there is a loose thread that requires an ending. Because there's a new beginning that's, kind of waiting for you in escrow that you can't transition into until you create that ending. Whether that's your parents aging, getting older, whether it's bills you got to pay, whether it's conversations about your cap table that need to be had, whatever it may be, all of those loose threads are just preventing you from making progress and stepping into the new beginnings that are probably already there and waiting for you. So, yeah, that's about it. I'm going to leave it there. This one is about the nature of fear. Cheers for now.